So we're being told we do have Shelby Talcott, who is waiting to join us. So Shelby is the White House correspondent for the for Semaphore. She's a great friend of the show. She's going to talk to us about these January 6th executive orders. So guys, let's go ahead and bring her in, and we'll discuss. So there she is. Shelby, how are you?
Good, how are you?
We're great. Thank you so much
nice to see you,
for
Shelby.
joining us. So guys, can we go ahead and put a tear sheet here on the January 6th pardon? Shelby, Donald Trump, one of the big executive orders that he signed yesterday was commuting the sentences of the Proud Boy and Oath Keeper leaders, along with some over 1,000 other January 6th Capitol rioters. Just talk to us about some of the background that went into us. There was a big question mark as to who exactly would get commutations and pardons. J.D. Vance, the vice president, was on television about 9 days ago and had indicated that it would be less sweeping, I guess, than currently. How did they come to that decision, and what's the end result?
Yeah, I think everybody thought that it was going to be less sweeping because we heard from so many Trump allies and even Donald Trump himself over the past 2 years who sort of said that it would be on a case-by-case basis. And there were a lot of people who told me that they would be doing it on a case-by-case basis. And like J.D. Vance said, if you, for example, beat up a police officer, then you deserve to go to prison. But that's not what ultimately happened. And I think what's really interesting here is the backstory. I've done a lot of reporting over the last 2 years on this situation. And remember, right after January 6th, Donald Trump never really wanted to bring that up. He condemned the situation, even if it was a little bit forced. And then he really didn't want to bring it up. He never mentioned it on the campaign trail. But there was an outside effort from allies of these defendants to get him on board. And so they started sort of petitioning people in his orbit. And then Donald Trump tapped an individual to oversee the January 6th defendants and their supporters. And they started coming to Mar-a-Lago, and they started meeting with Donald Trump and sort of petitioning him. And over the course of 2 years, we've seen how his opinion of these defendants has changed drastically, and it ultimately ended up that he just gave a sweeping pardon, which I think people in his orbit didn't even anticipate.
Interesting.
Talk about some of the specifics of the people who were pardoned. I think there were some, like 14 or 16, something like that, who had their sentences commuted. And Trump said, we can look into them further. Maybe they also deserve a full pardon. But by and large, everybody, whether they, just sort of wandered in and didn't know what they were doing, allegedly, or whether they were, involved in violently assaulting police officers, by and large, they were all set free, pardoned, full and complete pardon, et cetera. So give us some of the specifics of some of the people that we're talking about here and what they were convicted for doing on January 6th.
So one of the people who did get a pardon is Enrique Tarrio. He used to head up the Proud Boys. He was serving 22 years in prison for seditious conspiracy. And then there were also 5 other, I believe, Proud Boys who had their sentences commuted. And there were 14 in total sentences that were commuted. And Donald Trump said that they're going to be taking a look and seeing if they could potentially go even farther with that. But then there were other people who were sentenced for various crimes, for breaking and entering, for violence against a police officer. We had a wide array of crimes in this January 6th with these January 6th defendants, and everybody has essentially been pardoned or commuted.
One of the things I'm always curious about, Shelby, is how these things happen. And with Trump, we know that there are always, various side characters and pressures and other things happening. Since you wrote the story about this, what's your assessment? Like the activists and others who've been involved. I know of some people like Julie Kelly and Lara Logan, for example, who really made this into a cause over the last couple of years. Was it their media pressure? Was it lawmakers? Just talk to us about that.
I don't think it was media pressure, because the vast majority of the media was covering this really from one side of things. I think it was this. You have to remember also Kash Patel, who is very close to Donald Trump and going to be presumably in his administration, was also involved in this. He had a sort of, I think it was a nonprofit where he raised money for some of the January 6th defendants. When I spoke to him about this last year, he said that it was on a case-by-case basis and that none of the money was going to violent offenders. Mm-hmm. I didn't get any details about what those investigations looked like to determine who got the money or not, but he's been involved. And so these were people really close to Donald Trump. And so what happened was these outside figures like Julie Kelly, like the the lawyers for the January 6th defendants started petitioning these folks. And then these folks who were in Donald Trump's orbit helped bring them into Mar-a-Lago and helped have events. Donald Trump had events for January 6th defendants at Mar-a-Lago over the past 2 years. And it sort of all was a slow leak towards the big boss, Donald Trump. And eventually, as he sat down and talked with these folks, he was convinced, as Donald Trump often does, right? He talks to people all the time. He always wants people's advice. And I think over the past 2 years, the other thing to note is a lot of people in Donald Trump's orbit, as these defendants continued to get charged and as Donald Trump himself was facing legal issues, all of that affected his decision and how he ultimately became, a January 6th supporter of these defendants. He saw what the January 6th defendants were going through and said, I'm going through the same thing.
That makes sense.
I think it's worth remembering, on the day of January 6th and in the immediate aftermath, there was almost universal horror. Both at sort of conservative media outlets, places like Fox News were horrified. Many Republicans in the immediate aftermath, Republican elected officials were horrified. The public continues to be horrified. Taking this action is tremendously unpopular. So talk to us about the kind of what it says about the Republican Party and how it's moved over this past number of years. That now, I don't know, maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't expect anybody really to pipe up and be like, this is wrong. They assaulted police officers on the Republican side. Like, he shouldn't have done this. They're just going to go along with it at this point, which is tremendously different from the immediate reaction in the aftermath of that day.
I think it shows that Donald Trump is fully in charge of the Republican Party. And I've, to be clear, heard from a lot of folks who are close to Donald Trump who were a little bit unsettled by this decision. But will they come out and say it publicly? No. Probably not, because their feeling is Donald Trump is in charge and this is what he has decided. But I know a lot of people in the Republican Party are a little bit uncomfortable by this. I think that they would have been far more comfortable if it had been done by a case-by-case basis. And if those individuals who did do more violent crimes were not released. Right.
And Shelby, what do you think it says about this Trump administration coming in too? That, as you pointed out just weeks ago, his own vice president was like, well, of course the violent ones should be in prison and deserve to serve time. And now here we are weeks later, and it's like, nope, blanket, basically across the board. They're all no problem, good to go. Seditious conspiracy, beating a cop, doesn't matter. You're set free. What does it say about how he's approaching this 4-year term?
He makes all the decisions. And I also think, when Donald Trump comes to a decision on something, he takes the advice of a lot of people, but ultimately everybody in his orbit has always told me, you can give Donald Trump all the advice you want, but at the end of the day, he makes the decision based on what he wants to do. And he'll take your advice oftentimes and he'll keep it in mind. But he is the ultimate decision maker. And I think this is also another example of pick your battles, right? Susie Wiles, for example, his chief of staff, has been in his orbit and survived in his orbit for a really long time when a lot of other people have not. Mm-hmm. And that is partially because she's learned when to pick her battles. So my thinking of this situation is his mind was so made up, probably in part because he himself had gone through all of these legal issues that he felt were unjust, that it was not worth that fight. And so that's how a lot of people in Donald Trump's orbit are looking at it as, I don't love this, but it's just not worth the fight. Mm-hmm.
Also, we wanted to talk to you about DOGE and Vivek Ramaswamy. Guys, can we go ahead and put this up there on the screen? The news is out and it's official 100%. Vivek Ramaswamy will be exiting DOGE before it even really gets a chance to begin. They write, everyone wants him out, how Musk helped boot Ramaswamy from DOGE. Can you give us some of the backstory here on, I know that I heard this probably same to you, is tension in Mar-a-Lago, etc. Not sure I realized the extent to which Elon Musk had turned on Vivek, actually even earlier and prior to his tweet about American culture. So what do you, first give us some of the backstory and then give us some of what you think about what it portends for the future Trump administration.
There's a lot of stories going around, right? You hear from Vivek Ramaswamy allies who say, no, this is all just because he wants to run for governor. Right. Probably a little bit of it, but certainly there were tensions that I think none of us really realized. And I think it came down to, from what I've been told by some people, another version of the story is that there wasn't enough work being done by Vivek, and that H-1B visa debate, where he came out and supported it and kind of trashed American culture, was another big reason, sort of the nail in the coffin to get rid of him. But there are a lot of stories going around. Some people have said that he was annoying Donald Trump, in addition to Elon Musk. But ultimately, the run for governor, the impending run for governor, sort of gave them an easy out to, I think, push him out sooner. Because I know as recently as last week, I was talking to people close to Vivek who were telling me, yes, his plan has always been all along, do DOGE for 9 months and then run for governor. And certainly it has not been 9 months.
So are we, like, he just was annoying? Like, they just didn't like working with him? Is that basically what it came down to? And then they're like, oh, the Saved by the Bell thing. This is our ticket to push this guy out entirely.
Yeah, I honestly have not heard anything, any specific instance or a specific blow up fight. It was just, from my understanding, a bunch of different small things combined with some people.
Some people's personalities just don't work.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Exactly.
Wow, that is genuinely
and with
hilarious.
With the new Donald Trump also signed an executive order sort of solidifying DOGE within the U.S. government. Might have been difficult for Vivek Ramaswamy to do that while also running for Ohio governor.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. So the executive order, people are flagging, all it really did was change what the digital
the IT service department.
There was some already existing digital modernization thing that was created actually by Obama. And they're like, we're just renaming this DOGE. And so the way the executive order is written, at least, doesn't have this broad reaching, slash regulations and cut personnel and do all of these things. The executive order is pretty narrowly focused on IT, which, some are saying oh, well, that would be a great way for you to give yourself and your friends a lot of tech contracts. But what is your reading of the specifics of that executive order and whether that has any bearing on what the ultimate mandate of DOGE is going to be?
So from my understanding, the DOGE will get a White House office with about 20 people. And then each agency, this executive order directs each agency to implement sort of their own DOGE team. And so that is sort of how they're going to go about it. But you're right, a lot of it is directed on, boosting the technology capabilities, which we already have. So I don't think we know the answer of how effective it's going to be. And the other question that I have that I don't have the answer to is, with these teams, with these interagency teams, is there also going to be an out-of-agency overarching team that sort of oversees all of it and directs each agency into, here's what we want you to do for the agency, here's how much money we want you to cut? Or is it going to be up to each individual team to try to, get a combined $1 trillion?
Yeah.
Very, very important point.
Are you seeing any, there's been a lot of speculation Trump is certainly at some point going to fall out with Elon Musk and be upset that he's stealing the spotlight, blah, blah, blah. I don't really see any signs of it, but what do I know? I'm totally on the outside. Have there been any indications of that, as best as you can tell, Shelby?
I haven't seen it. And again, when I ask people about this, there have been people in Trump's orbit who are close to Trump who don't love Elon Musk, right? Steve Bannon, for example, has not made it a secret that he has issues with Elon Musk. But Elon Musk has a lot of money, and Donald Trump likes people who have a lot of money. And so Elon Musk also really helped Donald Trump win the election. And so for now, especially with Donald Trump in office, I think actually that helps, because it was one thing to be at Mar-a-Lago where Elon Musk, even though Mar-a-Lago is a private club, could get in pretty easily and be very close to Donald Trump day in and day out. Once he's in the Oval Office, it's going to be more difficult. And I think that helps Elon Musk because he won't be around every single day.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Well, sorry.
Oh, well, before I let you go, Shelby, I had to pick your brain on tennis. If you had any time to watch the Australian Open this week. For people who don't know, Shelby was a pro tennis player, which is crazy.
I didn't even.
Unbelievably impressive.
I've known you for 8 years. I don't even know that.
I'm in awe of that. But have you got any time to watch? There have been some incredible matches. I saw Djokovic took out Alcaraz early this morning or last night or something like that.
Yeah, I'm a big Djokovic fan,
Are you?
actually. I have not gotten to watch a ton of tennis because I've been so busy, but my mom watches it nonstop, so I always hear about it from her, and she always texts me as if I have it on, the screen 24 hours and him watching it. But I know a lot of the girls who were competing in it, so I also see it like on my Instagram. But I
Who's your favorite? Who do you cheer for? Female tennis player. Who's your favorite?
I haven't watched it. I haven't really been in tune for a few years.
You have other things going on.
Are like the oldies from 8 or 10 years ago. So
like the Serenas
I took a break.
I
took a break. I was a little washed up. I needed a break from it. So
that makes sense.
I relate to that. I relate to that. I never achieved the athletic prowess that you did, but being a former swimmer, people are like, "Oh, do you still swim?" Nope. Not unless I'm just like, hanging out, lounging, whatever. So, Shelby, in any case, you're a pro and a star reporter that we always appreciate.
Yes.
So thank you so much for helping shed some light on these early actions in the Trump administration.
Thank you, Shelby. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.